Hello everyone, I'm Janet Kadow. Thanks so much for joining the channel. Today I would like to talk about how the ego blocks our intuition and what we can do about it. So, as we start to grow intuitively in that little voice, that soft, sweet voice, that gentle energy giving us guidance that's barely noticeable in the back of the mind. It just kind of floats in and out of our mind, kind of um, uh, gently guides us. So our intuition is always soft, always quiet, barely noticeable. And that's why it's so important to understand how your mind works. And when those intuitive thoughts come in, you want to grab hold of them right away, pay attention to them. And to do that, we talked about mindfulness, being aware of how the mind works, and also to make that voice a little stronger, paying attention to your intuition, paying attention to, also following through when you get a little intuitive nudge to call someone or do something, buy something, go a different route, and so on. So when we start to do that, our intuition will get louder and will get stronger. But in the meantime, while we start to listen to our intuition, our ego is getting louder and more obnoxious, okay? Because it doesn't like it. It doesn't like when our intuition is in charge. It likes to be in charge. So it's all this time, most of our lives, since it started its development. I think our ego probably, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I think it starts around 2. We start to develop our sense of self and our sense of separateness from other people, and that's the beginning of a whole extraordinary journey of the ego. And then the ego takes over. So through adolescence and so on, we try to define the ego. And then in our adulthood, once our ego is defined, it's in charge. So since it's been in charge all this time, it's not going to like a usurper like your intuition making noise or you paying attention to that. So what it's going to do first is say, don't listen to that. That's bullshit. It doesn't mean anything. What are you trying to do? Why are you doing this? It doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. It's going to carry on and it's going to get loud. Okay? So you may have already noticed this when you started your intuitive work, this loud, obnoxious voice in your head that runs this program. Okay? And it's all your doubts and fears. Like, what do you think you're doing? What will other people think? That's your ego, right? That's your wounded ego. So when you start to listen to that instead of your intuition, you will be stopped in your tracks as far as building your intuition goes. We have to address it though, because the ego will not be ignored. The ego will not be put in its place. The ego will not be shut down. We have to deal with the ego. It's part of our human experience in this world. The ego is a very necessary thing. It creates our identity and it helps us understand that we are separate from other things. If we didn't have an ego, we would be at one. Our consciousness would be at one with the all that is, which is a great moment in spiritual nirvana, enlightenment. But it's not practical when we're driving the car, right? We don't want to think we're one with the tree when we're driving the car. So we want to be able to have this separateness and have a healthy ego that supports our spiritual growth, that supports our intuition, and doesn't get in the way. But at first, before we go on this long healing journey of the ego, we need to address it. Now, the one thing the ego wants above everything else is, sorry, just got distracted by the little light. The one thing the ego wants more than anything else is attention. Okay? So all you have to do is give it attention for it to shut up. So when your ego starts saying, what a bunch of bullshit, I can't believe you're doing this. Why are you listening to your intuition? It's not even real, blah, blah, blah. Then what you want to do in response is say, that might be true. That might be true that my intuition is not good, or that this is all a bunch of bullshit or whatever. That might be true. But I'm going to do this anyway. And then the ego shuts up. So once you can address it directly and say, you know what, that might be true, then it doesn't have any place to argue. It doesn't have any place to go. It would just shut up. So when you address the ego and all that negative self-talk as a separate being, as a separate entity, as a separate person, then it will start to calm down. Okay? And it will stop making such a fuss. So when I was first starting to practice listening to my intuition and following through, it was very loud and very obnoxious and really degrading and kind of abusive. So when I would say, that's interesting, that's a good point. When I would actually stroke my own ego that way, just having a mental conversation and say, that's a really good point. Wow, you're right. This is a bunch of crap. But guess what? I'm just going to listen to it anyway, just for today. So I would just say that, just for today, I'm going to listen to it anyway. I'd be like, all right, but I'll be back tomorrow, and you fall on your face, so that's great. One of my teachers names that negative voice. Beatrix had a way to, would ask you to name your negative voice. So you could do that too. There's negative Nancy, Debbie Downer, Bob Bummer, whatever. I mean, you can figure out a name for your own negative voice. Give it a persona. And that way it's a lot easier for your mind to deal with it, and also kind of puts it in its place. It doesn't have power over you once you name it. So this is kind of fun. So you can name it, and you can give it even an image in your head if that's easy for you. But once it starts yapping away, you could say, thanks, Nancy. It's been very helpful. I didn't really think of it that way. You're right. It's probably wrong. I always say you're right. I never argue. I always say you're right. The lights are going crazy. I don't know if those are lights or whatever that is going on. So anyway, so pay attention to that. Do your daily practice, or your following through on your intuition, as we talked about in the last video. And also use this tool to control that negative voice and calm it down a little bit, because once you agree with it, it can't argue with you. So remember that. Just agree with it. Whatever it says. It's been in charge for a long time, so it's not going to give up without a fight. But if you agree with it, it gives it less chance to fight, less opportunity to fight. So good luck with this. Have fun with it. And until next time, take care.